Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today, we are immersing ourselves in a period of life that's really fundamentally changing how we define adulthood.
Right.
It's called emerging adulthood. This stage, it's roughly, spanning from age 18 to 25.
And it's no longer seen as just this, extended adolescence or a messy start to real life.
No, not at all. It is, according to all the research we've looked at, a distinct developmental stage. It has its own unique biological, social, and psychological stakes.
It's a truly fascinating nexus point, and we've stacked up a pretty comprehensive body of research for this dive.
And the core focus seems to be this incredible paradox.
It is the paradox of biosocial development. So biologically, the human body is at, or, very near its absolute peak.
Maximum vigor, power, resilience, all of it.
All of it. But then socially, young people in this exact stage are making lifestyle choices that are, riskier and more consequential for their long-term health than at almost any other time in life.
And that's our mission today.
Hmm.
We want to give you a shortcut to really understanding the mechanics of this stage.
Right.
We need to unpack that irony, the implications of being, physically invincible while at the same time being behaviorally vulnerable.
And we're going to explore not just the superficial stuff, not just peak health on the outside. We're getting into the powerful, unseen internal protective functions.
The things that mask the cost of bad habits. This cost that the research calls allostatic load.
And this is just, it's crucial context. You have millions of young adults right now taking this extended time to, quote, linger before they fully commit.
Linger before careers, marriage, parenthood.
All of it. And the sources are really stressing that because of that delay, that window between 18 and 25 becomes absolutely critical for setting health trajectories that are going to ripple out for decades.
And that lingering you mentioned, it reflects a massive historical shift, doesn't it?
Oh, absolutely. Think about the historical context for a second.
Okay.
For millennia, and certainly even just a century ago in most industrialized nations, the expectation for someone who was, say, 20 years old was immediate, hard physical labor.
Right. On a farm, in a factory, in a trade.
Exactly. And it often led straight into marriage and childbearing. The pressure to hit those adult roles was intense and immediate.
So the expectations were high in terms of physical exertion and responsibility, and it was happening right at the time the body was most capable of handling it.
Precisely. But in the 21st century, those expectations for, hard, immediate physical work and universal parenthood, they just aren't applied to every young adult anymore.
Especially in developed countries.
Especially. And this is what creates the paradox we're talking about. The external pressures have lessened, the timelines have stretched way out, yet the body itself is operating at full biological capacity.
So this isn't just a transition phase.
No. It is, physiologically speaking, peak performance.
Okay, let's jump right into section 1 then. Let's define what that peak performance actually looks like. A time of, as you said, maximum vigor, growth, and strength.
Well, if you just look at the raw data, emerging adults are typically in, stellar health.
Right.
Statistically speaking, death from disease is extremely rare during this specific period.
And we can track the physical milestones pretty precisely, can't we?
We can. For anyone concerned about, reaching their maximum vertical growth, the sources note that full height is generally reached a bit earlier.
By age 16 for girls, 18 for boys.
Right, and that completion is, of course, really heavily influenced by high-quality nutrition and food availability. That's a key component of modern health globally.
But reaching full height doesn't mean the body is done developing. I think that's a common misconception.
It is a huge misconception. We see muscle growth and fat accumulation continuing well into the early 20s.
So it's like the final sculpting of the adult body.
That's a perfect way to put it. For women, this is the time when they typically attain their adult breast and hip size. These are crucial for reproductive capacity, sure, but they also define the adult female shape.
And for men?
For men, we see the culmination of strength. They're reaching their full shoulder width, their maximum upper arm strength, and achieving their densest bone mass.
So you are literally witnessing the human organism at peak function.
Peak function. Often stronger and faster than they will be at any other point in their lives.
And then this brings us to appearance. It's impossible to ignore how this biological peak intersects with the social world.
Especially when it comes to self-perception and attractiveness.
Right. The sources note that most emerging adults look vital and attractive, but that physical vitality comes with this observable element of vanity.
The vanity factor is fascinating because it's so deeply sociological. While emerging adults, like a lot of people, might not always admit to being vain about their appearance,
The behavior is what gives it away.
The behavior is undeniably observable, yes.
So how does the research actually quantify that? What does observable mean here?
Well, it manifests in spending habits and, attention patterns. We see a really strong attraction to fashion, to high-end brands, and to glamorous celebrities.
So they're spending their money on it.
A noticeable amount of their resources, sometimes disproportionate to their actual income, is being spent on clothing and appearance-related things.
I find that whole idea of observable vanity so interesting. Is it just superficial, or does the research suggest there's a genuine biological drive here, linked to that peak vigor, pushing them toward things like fashion or extreme fitness?
It's likely a blend of both. The sources suggest that we shouldn't just dismiss this as, simple vanity.
I think it can lead to good things.
Exactly. It often translates into positive health behaviors. For instance, exercise is often motivated less by some abstract concept like long-term cardiovascular health,
And more by the desire to look good right now.
more by the immediate visible desire to look fit and attractive. So in a way, vanity acts as this powerful, immediate motivator for good habits.
And there are practical non-sexual implications too, right?
Oh, absolutely. Concern about appearance may not just be connected to sex drive or what your friends think. It's also linked to seeking employment.
First impressions.
First impressions are critical when you're launching your career. Projecting vitality, competence, self-care, that's often a subconscious part of being hired or acing an interview. Appearance becomes a professional asset, not just a personal one.
Okay, let's pivot now to the really crucial developmental question that always seems to surround this stage. Is emerging adulthood a universal, biologically programmed human stage?
Yeah.
Or is it just a recent cultural phenomenon?
Something limited to certain societies that can, afford it.
Exactly.
This is where the core academic debate lies, and the sources really force us to consider both sides.
So what's the sad one?
On one side, you have researchers like Arnett. Back in 2000, he proposed the view that this is a truly distinct, separate stage of life.
Characterized by things like identity exploration.
Instability, feeling in between, all those psychological markers.
But the challenge there is, while the description is compelling, how do you prove it's universal? How do you prove it's not just the result of economic changes?
Exactly. And the source material acknowledges that there's limited explicit research that has universally proven this stage is biologically mandated across all human cultures.
Which leads us to the other side of the argument.
It leads directly to the counterargument, championed by researchers like Munson and his colleagues in 2013. Their position is that emerging adulthood is purely a cultural construct.
Something that just arose because of delayed economic independence.
And an increased reliance on higher education and, of course, delayed marriage.
This is where we have to bring in that powerful academic critique from the sources. The problem of applying research only to weird populations.
WEIRD, yes. This acronym, developed by Henrik and his colleagues in 2010, stands for Western, Educated, Industrialized, Rich, and Democratic.
And it's one of the most important concepts to emerge in social science this century.
It really is, because it acts as this massive check on our tendency to overgeneralize.
Let's break down what that means in practice for this age group.
Well, if developmental psychology studies only young adults in, say, Boston or London, the findings are based on individuals who have the luxury of delaying life's big milestones.
Right. The R for rich and E for educated are the keys here.
Absolutely. Wealth allows young people to rack up significant debt to get a 4, 5, even 6-year degree without the immediate need to support a family. Education stretches the timeline. Industrialization means there aren't immediate labor demands pulling them into the workforce at 18.
So if emerging adulthood is only possible when a society is wealthy enough to allow its young people a decade to get a degree, travel, and launch a career, then it's an artifact of privilege.
Not a universal biological clock. It's cultural, not a true life stage. That's the compelling critique.
But the sources don't just leave it there.
No, they don't. They provide a crucial counterbalancing fact from the American Community Survey data in 2014. It suggests that while the causes might be economic and cultural, the phenomenon itself, this delayed independence and an extended emerging adulthood, appears to be a worldwide trend.
So it's extending beyond just the wealthiest nations.
It is. Globalization, access to technology, and this universal push for university degrees are now influencing development across many middle-income countries as well.
So the stage, regardless of where it came from, is now globally relevant. Which brings us back to the body itself. When young adults choose to lead these, well, often demanding, unstable, sometimes chaotic lifestyles, how does the body handle the strain?
Especially a body at its peak.
Right, it's got to have some serious internal protection.
It absolutely does.
And here's where it gets really interesting. We need to talk about the core physiological concepts that make emerging adults so incredibly resilient.
The things that allow a student to pull 3 all-nighters in a week, eat nothing but instant ramen, and still somehow perform well on an exam.
Exactly. We're moving beyond just muscle mass and into these internal protective functions.
And this resilience is a biological marvel. It's built on 3 interacting systems that are all working at maximum efficiency in this age group.
Organ reserve, homeostasis, and allostasis.
Those are the 3.
Let's start with organ reserve. This is, well, it's the definition of having extra capacity, right? The emergency fund of the body.
That's a great analogy. Organ reserve is the capacity of organs, the heart, lungs, kidneys, liver, to allow the body to cope with sudden stress via these vast amounts of extra unused functioning ability. It's the built-in backup engine.
Can you give us a concrete example? What does that look like in practice compared to, say, an older adult?
Okay, think about the response to a severe sudden infection, like a really bad case of the flu or severe food poisoning.
Right.
An older person, maybe in their 60s or 70s, they might need to be hospitalized for dehydration or because their heart just can't handle the increased metabolic demand from a high fever. Their organ reserve is depleted.
But the emerging adult,
Because of their maximum organ reserve, might just shake that same infection off in 48 hours. They can tolerate a much higher metabolic load, a more extreme fever, the strain on their kidneys, all without collapsing.
because their body has, what, 4 times the unused capacity?
Literally. It has all this unused capacity ready to jump in and manage the crisis. It's the backup tank of fuel and the fully charged spare battery all working at the same time.
Okay, next up is homeostasis. This is the immediate high-speed correction system.
Right. Homeostasis is defined as the body's immediate minute-to-minute adjustment of all its systems to keep physiological functions in a state of stable equilibrium.
So it's like a highly sensitive thermostat.
The perfect metaphor. You walk into a hot room, you sweat immediately to cool down. That's homeostasis.
The classic scenario in the sources is the young adult who sleeps too little and is tired the next day. How is homeostasis handling that?
Well, it's an immediate, though uncomfortable correction. The body immediately throws systems out of balance to compensate. Cortisol levels rise, you feel sluggish and irritable, your concentration flags.
But you can fix it pretty quickly.
And that's the key. By getting even just a few hours of catch-up sleep, the system rapidly returns to a stable state. That quick, adaptive response is homeostasis in action. It fixes the immediate imbalance.
But then we move to allostasis. And this is where the long-term stakes really start to become visible.
This is the big one.
Allostasis is much more complex, right? It's less immediate than homeostasis.
Right. Allostasis is the dynamic body adjustment that affects your overall physiology. It refers to the longer-term adjustment needed when stress is chronic and repeated. It's not about the quick fix. It's about the cost of constantly having to fix things.
So if homeostasis is the immediate thermostat trying to keep the temperature stable, how would you describe allostasis?
I'd say allostasis is more like the wear and tear on the furnace itself. The wear and tear you get from constantly having to crank the thermostat up and down because the house isn't properly insulated. The body, when it's constantly exposed to repeated poor sleep, poor diet, or chronic stress, has to repeatedly adjust its fundamental set points.
Things like resting heart rate, blood sugar.
Blood sugar regulation, inflammatory markers, yeah. And this is the crucial distinction. Homeostasis deals with the immediate incident. Allostasis deals with the physiological cost of repeated incidents.
And when the body has to constantly readjust that long-term baseline, that's when we incur the ultimate physiological cost. That's what the sources call allostatic load.
Exactly. Allostatic load is the wear and tear on the body that results from chronic overactivity or underactivity of those adaptive systems.
So all 3 things, organ reserve, homeostasis, allostasis, they work really well together in young adults.
Which contributes to their peak health. But that very efficiency is the double-edged sword.
Because it masks the long-term damage.
Precisely. The young adult feels fine. They feel invincible. Their immediate homeostatic correction is so powerful that they don't experience the immediate consequences that an older adult would.
Let's go back to that sleep analogy, but let's extend it to illustrate this idea of the bad bargain.
The bad bargain is all about selling your future vitality for some immediate gain.
So 1 night of poor sleep
Is fixed by homeostasis. But the sources warn that years of sustained poor sleep habits, or years of relying on excessive caffeine, alcohol, junk food to compensate, that actually reduces years of your life.
But the immediate cost feels like nothing.
It's negligible because the young body is so resilient you can ignore those slight fatigue signals. But the allostatic load, the chronic elevation of stress hormones like cortisol, the minor systemic inflammation, it all accumulates silently.
The body is always keeping score.
Always, even when you aren't paying attention.
I think this is probably the most critical takeaway for you, the listener, if you're navigating this stage. The habits you form now don't just affect your grades or your performance this week.
They profoundly affect your vitality in old age.
Right.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, aging, or what scientists call senescence, is essentially defined by the gradual increase in allostatic load. The young adult is born with this massive health inheritance.
Peak organ reserve, super efficient systems.
And every risky choice, every poor diet decision is basically drawing down heavily on that inheritance. You are making withdrawals that you will desperately need to cover the inevitable physiological costs that come in your 60s and 70s.
So that youthful resilience doesn't eliminate the cost.
It just delays the bill.
Shifting gears a bit, let's look at how emerging adults actually treat these peak performing bodies. Given this incredible resilience and vast organ reserve, we're moving into lifestyle choices. Activity, diet, and unfortunately, a serious risk period for disordered eating.
And starting with activity, the sources provide statistics that are, well, frankly, they're pretty disheartening.
Especially considering the sheer physical capacity of this age group.
Exactly. Only 62% of emerging adults meet the full standard for aerobic exercise.
So about 2 out of every 5 are failing to meet the basic standards for healthy cardiovascular activity at the time their hearts are the strongest they'll ever be.
And for muscle strengthening exercise, which is so crucial for building the bone density that prevents fragility later in life, it drops even further.
How far?
Only 33% meet that standard. So, while they are physically capable of being the strongest they will ever be, the majority are choosing a lifestyle that's sedentary or, just not prioritizing structured strength-building activity.
So what's the disconnect? Is it a time pressure issue or is it something else?
It's complex, but the sources do offer some encouraging factors for when exercise does happen.
Okay.
Activity is often significantly encouraged by social elements. Friendship, communities, team sports, group classes.
This is easier to stick with it if your friends are doing it.
It's much easier for an emerging adult to adhere to a routine when it's tied to a social commitment or a communal activity. It provides accountability and a shared purpose, rather than relying purely on internal individual discipline.
The drive to socialize kind of supersedes the drive for individual health goals.
In many cases, yes.
Okay, let's move to diet and weight management. We know this affects future development at every stage, but now we get that a chronic poor diet is just silently accelerating that allostatic load.
And when we discuss weight, we should probably revisit two technical terms that frame the research. First is the set point.
This is the body weight that your homeostatic processes are always trying to maintain.
Right. Your body treats the set point like a fortress. It uses hormones and metabolic adjustments to fight hard to keep you at this weight, which makes permanent shifts incredibly difficult without a really sustained, intense effort.
And the second term is the body mass index, or BMI.
The simple ratio of a person's weight in kilograms divided by their height in meters squared. It's an easy metric, widely used in public health studies, even though we know it has limitations for, say, highly muscular people.
Now, to really understand the immediate impact of diet in this age group, we have to look closely at the findings of the CARDIA study.
Right, the coronary artery risk development in young adult study. And this wasn't just a survey, it was a deep longitudinal look at cardiovascular risk factors.
And what's so fascinating about the CARDIA findings is the level of specificity the sources highlight. It's not just a general eat healthy message.
No, specific diet factors matter independently of each other. That's the nuance that gets lost in public messaging.
So what do they find?
The study found that fast foods, high-fat diets, and even diet soda each had independent negative effects on health markers.
Why single out diet soda? We so often hear it framed as the better choice.
Well, the sources imply that the independent effect of diet soda speaks to broader dietary patterns and maybe some hidden metabolic costs. It suggests that even the artificial sweeteners, or perhaps just the psychological habit of consuming highly processed items, contribute negatively.
So it's not just a proxy for unhealthy people.
No, Researchers were able to isolate these factors and determine that they were individual drivers of poor health outcomes.
And the overall results affected more than just body weight, right?
Correct. The overall results showed that these poor diet habits, high fast food, high fat, and diet soda consumption, affected internal functioning, measured by lab tests.
We're talking about things like high cholesterol.
High cholesterol, elevated glucose tolerance test results, and inflammatory markers, all showing that the internal systems were already straining under the allostatic load.
Even if the young adults felt perfectly fine.
Exactly. Thanks to that robust organ reserve, it serves as this invisible warning sign that the body is already paying a hidden price.
And now we have to transition to a really serious public health issue where emerging adulthood is identified as a critical risk period.
Disordered eating.
Yeah.
This period, 18 to 25, is a time of maximum instability. New environments, intense peer comparison, media pressure, the transition away from parental oversight.
It makes it a critical period for both the development and the prevention of these serious conditions.
It does, and we need to be really clear about the distinctions between the three major disorders detailed in the sources.
Okay, so first up is anorexia nervosa.
Anorexia is characterized by an intense pathological fear of weight gain. This is paired with a severely distorted body image, and it leads to extreme calorie restriction and often dangerously low body weight.
So the hallmark is the severe restriction.
The restriction and the fixation on thinness, which often leads to medical crises from malnutrition.
Second is bulimia nervosa.
Bulimia is defined by a cycle of behavior. It involves recurrent episodes of binge eating, consuming an unusually large amount of food in a discrete period, followed by subsequent compensatory purging behaviors.
So induced vomiting or using laxatives.
Exactly. It's that harmful cycle of binging and compensating that defines this specific condition.
And finally, binge eating disorder, which has gotten more attention recently.
It has. While it's common in adolescence, it often persists into this stage and involves compulsive overeating episodes. These are frequently associated with feelings of distress or a lack of control, but significantly without the compensatory purging behaviors we see in bulimia.
And the prevalence of all of these just underscores the intense pressure around appearance and control during this highly transitional life stage.
It really does.
Moving into our fourth section, we shift our focus to the sexual and reproductive life of emerging adults, which is maybe the purest example of biological vigor peaking at this age.
The sources confirm this without any ambiguity. The sexual reproductive system is especially vigorous. Sex hormones are at their height, and the sex drive is powerful.
So biologically, this is prime time for reproduction.
Absolutely. Infertility is rare, orgasm is frequent, and significantly, birth is easier. There are fewer complications in the early 20s than at virtually any other time in a woman's life.
So fertility peaks in late adolescence and early adulthood. But society and young adults themselves they've fundamentally altered the timeline.
They've created a massive chasm between biological readiness and societal preference. Emerging adults prefer births to happen much later.
Usually in the late 20s or early 30s.
Right, a delay that aligns with getting that degree and establishing a career. The body is screaming now, but the culture is saying, wait.
And that tension shows up in their dating and sexual practices. We also have to acknowledge the prevailing sexual double standard noted in the source material.
Right. Historically, there's been a significant double standard where adults tend to condone and sometimes even encourage more sexual activity among young men than among young women.
Often attaching moral judgments or different expectations.
Different expectations of responsibility based on gender. And while this may be eroding, it's still a factor in how emerging adults navigate their sexual lives.
And the sources give some important historical context here. We need to remember that historically, before widespread contraception, most babies were born to women under 25.
And often within marriages that happened around age 20, which led to larger, earlier families.
That world has been completely transformed by technology.
It has. Today, emerging adults overwhelmingly prefer premarital sexual activity, but critically, they demand access to reliable birth control. The data is clear on this.
Advances in contraception have dramatically reduced the birth rate in this age bracket.
Even while simultaneously increasing the overall rate of sexual activity.
So globally, the pattern is consistent. Emerging adults are having fewer babies, but they're engaging in more sexual activity overall.
And they're managing the reproductive consequences through medical means. This just highlights the incredible efficacy of modern science. The sources point out that the most effective methods of contraception available are automatic and long-acting.
Implants and intrauterine devices. or IUDs.
Right.
Let's nail down that failure rate because it's pretty striking.
The failure rate for these long-acting reversible contraceptives, IUDs, and implants is cited as incredibly low, essentially once in 100 years of use.
They are nearly foolproof.
Almost. That's the technological reality. But here's the behavioral gap.
Right.
Those options, while incredibly effective, require anticipation, a commitment to a method, and crucially, the cost and effort of seeing a doctor for insertion.
Whereas the cheaper, more accessible methods, like pills and condoms, rely on constant, perfect user adherence.
Which is much higher in theory than it is in real-world practice for this age group. And that tension leads directly to unexpected pregnancies, despite the existence of near-perfect preventative technology.
But while modern medicine has successfully managed the risk of unexpected pregnancy, it has catastrophically failed to manage the risk of sexually transmitted infections, STIs.
Oh, absolutely. The STI rate has reached epidemic proportions in this very age group.
What's so alarming is the concentration. Half of all new STI cases worldwide occur in people younger than 26.
It's an enormous concentration of risk in one small window of the population.
And the sources provide the developmental conflict that explains this. The best prevention for STIs is lifelong monogamy.
Fidelity with one uninfected partner.
But emerging adults typically practice what we call serial monogamy.
Right, engaging in committed, sexually exclusive relationships one after the other, but often with gaps, and critically, often with insufficient testing or transparency between partners.
And then you have to layer on globalization.
Exactly. The modern world fuels every contagious disease, including AIDS and HIV. High mobility, high density in places like college campuses, and high sexual activity, combined with a willingness to take risks.
It creates a perfect storm for rapid transmission.
It does. The biological peak of sexual drive collides with the social environment of delayed commitment and intense mobility.
This brings us to the broader topic of risk-taking, which the sources suggest is the defining non-physical characteristic of emerging adulthood.
It is the defining behavioral reality, for sure. Emerging adulthood is marked by a greater willingness to take all sorts of risks.
And crucially, this risk-taking, even the extreme kind, isn't necessarily considered pathological in this stage.
Right, it's developmentally normal. Because the brain is still maturing, particularly the prefrontal cortex, which is responsible for executive function and assessing long-term consequences.
And we see the tragic consequences of this in the leading causes of death for people aged 15 to 25.
They are overwhelmingly external behavioral deaths: accidents, homicides, and suicides. These are not deaths from disease. They are deaths rooted in decisions and environments.
And this risk profile has a specific timeline, which researchers call the accident hump.
The highest frequency of accidents occurs sharply at about age 20, and then it drops off as young adults gain experience, their brain matures, and they begin to stabilize their social environment.
And emerging adult males are statistically the most common killers and victims in this demographic.
Often due to a lethal combination of high physical capability, peak impulsivity, and substance use.
Why age 20 specifically? It just seems so early.
It's that perfect storm of newly acquired freedom, unsupervised driving, managing their own money, living away from home, combined with the biological peak of sensation-seeking behavior and the last stages of frontal lobe development.
Which is still catching up to the powerful limbic system.
The system that drives emotion and reward-seeking. So they possess peak confidence but lack peak caution.
But risk isn't universally negative, and the sources make a point of contrasting these dangerous risks with what they call beneficial risks.
Absolutely. And this is so important. The same psychological willingness to push boundaries that leads to a traffic accident is also the engine of progress.
So beneficial risks are things that help society or the individual grow.
Things like enrolling in college and taking on debt to do it, joining a new sports team that pushes your physical limits, volunteerism in a challenging foreign country, starting a business, or engaging in extreme sports safely.
It's the positive side of that willingness to push boundaries.
And explore your identity.
Yes.
Finally, let's talk about substance use. The data here also shows a clear peak and decline that correlates with this life stage.
It does. Illegal drug use specifically peaks at about age 20 and then declines sharply with age. This is the period when experimental use often solidifies into dependence for a significant portion of the population.
And we should be clear about what constitutes drug abuse in this context, according to the source material. Drug abuse is defined as a condition of dependence that produces a physiological or psychological drive, or both, to ingest more of the drug. The substance is no longer a choice, it's a requirement to avoid discomfort, whether that's physical withdrawal or psychological distress.
And this stage of life, with all its instability and high stress, is when that drive often solidifies into addiction.
It is. But while quitting any addiction is incredibly difficult at any age, there is an interesting observation in the sources. The process eases a bit when emerging adulthood is definitively over.
So it gets a little easier later.
A little. While the addiction itself remains a monumental challenge, the social and environmental context improves. Once an individual moves into true adulthood, with a stabilized career, a committed partnership, a settled residence, the reduction in peer pressure, and the establishment of mature routines.
And the cognitive maturity that follows.
It all provides a stabilizing framework that can make sustained recovery slightly more manageable. The context changes, and that aids the effort.
So what does this all mean? We've covered the fundamental dichotomy of emerging adulthood. We've got peak physical health, peak organ reserve, peak biological vigor.
All combined with peak behavioral risk, peak allostatic load accumulation, and peak vulnerability to external dangers like accidents and STIs.
It means this stage is a crucial, high-stakes window of paradox. The body is so resilient that it handles almost anything you throw at it today.
You can neglect it, abuse it, stress it, and your body gives you no immediate warning sign that anything is wrong.
But that very resilience is masking the profound, cumulative, long-term cost of those lifestyle choices.
That concept of allostatic load is the absolute key. It's the key to understanding the biosocial stakes of this period. You are literally building your health foundation, or lack thereof, for your final decades right now.
The small choices you make at age 20 about diet, sleep, and managing stress.
Those are what determine the vitality that's available to you at age 70. The irony is that the period of maximum strength is also the period where the most invisible chronic damage is being done.
And we want to leave you with this final provocative thought. It stems directly from the tension we discussed between technology and behavior.
Right.
We noted that highly effective contraception IUDs and implants have an astonishingly low failure rate, only once in 100 years. They effectively minimize the risk of unwanted pregnancy, yet they require the anticipation and cost of seeing a doctor.
At the same time, STI rates have reached epidemic proportions globally, even though the best prevention is known and simple: consistent, safe behavior.
So when we analyze the gap between the near-perfect effectiveness of modern reproductive science and the rising rates of sexually transmitted infections in this age group, is the primary barrier to health outcomes for emerging adults fundamentally about access to these services?
Or is it inextricably linked to behavior, to risk tolerance, and the persistent willingness to take interpersonal and sexual risks during this highly volatile developmental stage? It's a tension worth mulling over as you navigate your own journey through this fascinating developmental stage.